Hey guys, it's me, Jessica, and I'm here to tell you that this would be a very good week for us all to be playfully, gently, thoughtfully exploring the stories that we tell ourselves. So, when we become conscious of the fact that we're all storytelling all the time, and when we become aware that those stories that we tell actually impact our real life events, which of course then that folds back into the stories we tell, it becomes quite clear that to be magicians, to be magical people, we need to be able to perceive the stories that we're telling, especially the habitual ones that are sort of like so looping and so repeating that we might just think that that's reality rather than simply a story that we've told ourselves over and over. So we have to see our stories. The next thing we need to do is sort of adopt this witness consciousness, which is like the same sort of consciousness as when we're meditating and we have a thought and we're able to perceive that just because we think a thing doesn't mean it's true, and or true all the time, and just because we have a thought doesn't mean that we are that thought. So that witness consciousness is just about, whether it's thoughts or stories, getting a little space between our everyday selves and the more sort of higher self, inner being, soul, spirit, heart, gut, whatever you want to call it. So we have to see our stories. We have to recognize their stories. We have to kind of have that little remove, that little space between us, like thinking we are that story. And then comes the opportunity. And the opportunity is to change the stories that we want to change, to delete the stories that we want to delete. And also, and very importantly, I think at this time, is to dream up some more expansive, healthful, beautiful, more egalitarian, more compassionate stories, not only for ourselves, but for the world. And just to clarify, when I'm talking about stories, first let's talk about a collective story, a story that the collective has had for many thousands of years. Not for all time, but just for the last, maybe depending on your perspective, 5 to 2,000 years. Here's a collective story we all have. This is just an example. The collective story that we've been operating under that's brought us to the place that we are is human beings are at the top of the hierarchy. Then perhaps it goes animals and maybe plants and trees. And then the rest of nature is down here. All the elemental natural forces, of course, all the landscapes across the earth. So this is not reality, right? We know, if we stop to think about it, that human beings, we're just little guys on a very small planet orbiting a kind of old star. Our sun is kind of old in the midst of very expansive space, galaxies. So that's the reality. But the story that we've been telling is humans are up here and then all the nature is down here. And of course, that's led to all kinds of things. So we can really see the power of that story. Then, if we wanted to, we could zoom in on the top part of that story where the humans are and realize that we have many other stories that develop a hierarchy of different types of humans. So we have a hierarchy of humans above all else, what is man-made above all else, and then we zoom in, hierarchies of humans, which are also stories, okay? I'm not saying that there aren't real systemic effects of these stories. I'm actually saying that there are. And I'm also saying that if we can take time to gently sort of tease apart our just thinking that those stories are the reality, if we can just tease out a little space, then we can heal some things, but also perhaps in terms of story work, the more important thing is that we carve out little bits of time to think of new stories that have a lot of benefit, not just for us, but for everyone if they happen to take hold. Let me share an example of instead of a collective story, the story an individual might have. Let's see. Okay, so for instance, perhaps I have experienced the same type of professional dilemma multiple times. So I can either tell myself the story, I'm going in circles here, or I could tell myself the story, actually, I'm so much different. I've evolved a lot since the last time I came upon this. This is just life testing me to see if I've learned all the things. So rather than I'm going in circles as the story I'm telling myself relative to these, professional things I'm running into, I can say, actually, I'm different than last time I came around this way. So I'm actually on a growth spiral. So even if there are things that my soul would like to experience from many different perspectives and experience them perhaps repeatedly, I'm growing. So each time I come upon this, I'm actually quite different, and I've changed a lot, and I've improved a lot, and I've evolved a lot. So I'm going to have to call this, I'm on a growth spiral, and I'm coming around to that important thing again, rather than I'm just going in circles, I'm making no progress. So hopefully these small examples, actually that first one was really big and nuanced, and we could maybe talk about that at length a different time. But in the interest of getting to the delicious dessert part of this little video, let's just summarize in a very clear way what we're talking about here. Storytelling. We are all telling ourselves stories all the time, and we are being told stories all the time. And these stories lead to and inform our actions individually and collectively that affect our individual and collective life experiences. So if you're a magical person, I'd say you want to get involved with becoming aware of your story, getting that little bit of sort of witness consciousness, like, oh, let me see this from a distance, maybe from a higher perspective. And then, could I envision, could I dream up, could I create like some more expansive, joyful stories to pay attention to? Let's now get to that dessert part that I mentioned. This is a little visualization. If you don't want to close your eyes, you don't have to. Okay? If you want to close your eyes, I like to close my eyes. You'll only go deeper. Okay? My dog just laid down like right on my foot. Okay? And I could tell myself a story about that and how now I'm going to start this video over and blah, blah, blah. But instead, I'm going to be like, whatever. Everybody knows I'm at my house. Most people know I have a dog. She's a sweetheart. So she bumped the camera. Okay. All right, let's settle in. So if you like to close your eyes, close your eyes. And very gently, I want you to imagine that you are in a beautiful garden. And this is like a really, really well cared for, a garden that is full of vitality. Maybe there's food growing, maybe there are flowers growing, maybe there are trees growing. Maybe there's a place to sit in this garden, or maybe you just want to walk around, maybe there's some little paths, maybe you have to open a little gate to get into this garden. So right away and very quickly, we are bringing ourselves into this garden. And first, just looking around this garden and investigating any stories that might pop up. So you're looking for little bits of resonance between maybe things that you find in this garden and things that are maybe happening in your real life. So you're looking at metaphor, symbolism, representations. Perhaps if you're in, for instance, a very dry, deserty garden, maybe you feel a little parched. Maybe you need a little more affluence in your daily life. So you're looking for little things like that. You're looking for the stories that sort of arise naturally in this garden as you begin to consider how this garden relates to things in your life. So a little bit of time to do that. Just look around the garden you happened to pop into here and sort of making some connections between what's going on with you in daily life and what's happening in this garden. There may be animals in this garden as well, pollinators, other creatures. Just checking out the action in the garden and sort of making connections with the action in your daily life. Now imagine, as you're still in this garden, that all of a sudden you shrink down really small. So you're about the size maybe of a little mouse, or maybe a little bird. You're still you, but you become very small. And now you're able to explore this garden from this different vantage point. So you're really little, you're really small, and now you're checking out this garden. Perhaps again, from this smaller perspective, just taking note of anything that sort of, oh, that actually seems linked to something happening in my life. And also just exploring from this, you're little tiny. Now everything looks different. I'm moving through the garden as your little tiny self, just checking stuff out, making connections. Few more moments being little tiny in this garden. Seeing what you find, seeing what you see. And now imagining that you grow quite big. So from your little tiny size, you not only grow to regular size, your normal size, but now you're growing up even taller, like maybe as tall as a tree. And so now you're looking at this garden from this way different vantage point. You are very, very big, you're very, very tall, so you're definitely looking down at the garden now. And to begin in this larger state, again, just checking things out. Letting yourself make some connections. But from this sort of larger than life perspective, maybe here is where you can start figuring out like the stories about things that you want to keep and encourage and grow. Also maybe from this vantage point, you see a couple weeds down there in the garden. You can just reach down and pull them. Thought story weeds. And maybe from this taller vantage point, you also see like, oh, there the little fence that needs repair. So maybe you're going to fix something. Or maybe from this taller vantage point, you're going to bring water to this garden. Or maybe from this taller vantage point, you can sort of repair or improve things within the garden. Much easier than when you were sort of regular sized and especially small. Witnessing and caring for this garden as this tall creature with this higher perspective on what's going on. a little bit more time to sort of be tall in this garden. And then as you're ready, really gently, like bring yourself back from that very tall size where you're able to see everything from very high up to your regular size. And bring your regular size self back home into the body or whatever space that you're in. And for the last few moments of this experience, let go of the idea of the garden. Let go of any thoughts or stories maybe that you were specifically working with. And now just for this last little bit of time, just open your mind and free associate. So sort of the free association is centered on the stories we tell ourselves and just letting some insights come in. And every person will have different insights, and any person will have a different insight at a different time in their life. But right now, a little time to just contemplate the stories we tell ourselves, and perhaps how to skillfully use that power that we have to tell stories. And if you choose to sort of continue to join us in exploring the storytelling that's going on all the time, maybe over the next week or so, a couple of things that can be very important to know about stories is that stories have what? They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But what comes after the end of a story is a new beginning. And stories also, we have prequels and sequels. We have a prologue and an epilogue. So as long as we're living, we always have new opportunities to reframe stories from the past by how we're living now and actively create the stories we'll be living in the future by what we are dreaming up now. And yeah, the other thing that I want to say, but I'm not quite sure if I have the right words, is this. The more we play with recognizing the stories that are going on, recognizing that we are not those stories, and just because we are telling ourselves a story or we are told a story doesn't mean it's true or true all the time. And the more we sort of envision or play around with like a more expansive story for the future, we eventually become able to perceive ourselves and others and the collective storytelling in real time. And that is a wonderful opportunity for what I call two-pointed awareness, which is me, Jessica, my psyche, my ego, my thinking mind is alive and moving through the world. And simultaneously, that tall Jessica from the garden is also aware of everything that's happening and the stories that are being told. And those two Jessicas together, or the two of whoever you are together, those two together are a powerful foundational team for any magic you wish to create and any healing that needs to be done. So, thank you so much for watching. I would love to see in the comments down below how you sort of maybe had an insight about the storytelling of all, or just even something that you saw in the garden, especially if it was particularly beautiful or meaningful to you. And I am going to do another one of these next week, so stay tuned. And thank you so, so much for, again, watching that first video and joining me here today. I'm wishing you well, and I will see you next week.